Welcome to the deep dive. You're probably here because you want to get a solid handle on complex topics without wading through endless reports.
And that's exactly what we aim for.
Today, we're diving headfirst into something pretty fundamental to the American experience: belonging.
You shared some really interesting material looking at identity, citizenship in the U.S.
Yeah, and our mission really is to unpack who gets to decide who truly belongs here.
It's a huge question.
We're going to explore the historical, legal, cultural, socioeconomic, political layers. All of it.
And crucially, listen to those voices that often get drowned out.
Exactly. It's a big picture, but hopefully by the time we're done, you'll have a much sharper understanding of, how this whole idea of American belonging has shifted.
And what it means now. What's fascinating right away, I think, is how the source material frames belonging.
How so?
Well, it's not just about legal status or, just being here physically.
Right.
It's presented as this deeper thing, a social emotional connection to a place and its people. And it becomes clear almost immediately, looking at the sources, that this has been a constantly, shifting concept throughout American history.
Absolutely. So let's kick things off there with that history.
Good starting point.
The source material really highlights immigration laws as like a foundational influence.
Definitely.
I mean, you think about the Naturalization Act of 1790. Citizenship was limited to white free males, period.
Stark, isn't it? And what's maybe less discussed is how that early definition didn't just exclude people.
Yeah.
It actively shaped the legal and social frameworks that kept marginalizing non-white individuals for, centuries.
Right. It created this sort of ingrained idea of an ideal citizen.
Exactly. An ideal we're arguably still grappling with today. That early law set a really powerful precedent.
Baked in exclusion based on race and gender right from the start.
Pretty much. And then as the country grew, immigration patterns changed. Late 19th, early 20th centuries,
Yeah.
we saw even more restrictive measures pop up.
Like the Immigration Act of 1924.
That's a key one, yeah. Those quotas based on ethnicity. It really just underscores this hierarchy of belonging that was being, actively enforced.
Right. It wasn't just how many people, but very specifically which people. From where?
Definitely a clear preference for certain European groups.
And this fueled a lot of that nativist sentiment, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That idea of favoring the native-born over immigrants.
Often with fear or suspicion of foreigners mixed in.
So you have these legal walls going up.
And at the same time, this cultural narrative saying some people are just, inherently more American.
And that cultural narrative is just incredibly powerful, isn't it?
It really is.
It shapes how newcomers are seen, sure, but it can have these really long-lasting effects even after the laws themselves change.
Which brings us, I guess, to the 20th century civil rights movements.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting.
How so?
Because these movements fundamentally challenged those deeply entrenched exclusionary ideas.
Exactly. You look at landmark laws like the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65, absolute game changer.
They directly pushed back, yeah, against the idea that your race or ethnicity or gender should limit your ability to fully belong.
Could participate fully in American society.
Yeah.
It was a fundamental shift, wasn't it?
A huge shift in understanding who gets to be a full participant.
Yeah.
And the source material rightly points out, the echoes of these historical policies. They're still very much present today.
In our current debates.
Absolutely. Debates about immigration, nationality, identity. The journey towards truly inclusive belonging is, it's far from over.
Okay, so we've got a sense of the historical backdrop. Now let's dive into the legal side.
Right. The legal nuts and bolts.
The U.S. Constitution, particularly the 14th Amendment, lays down some pretty basic rules about citizenship.
Birthright citizenship.
If you're born here, you're a citizen. That seems fairly clear-cut, doesn't it?
It seems straightforward on the surface, yeah. The 14th Amendment is definitely a cornerstone.
But
the source makes a really crucial point. Legal definitions, while, essential.
Yeah.
They're only one piece of this bigger puzzle of belonging.
How society perceives belonging can be different.
Exactly. Very different from what the law technically says.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
You can have the legal right but still face discrimination or just not feel accepted.
Precisely.
The source also gets into naturalization, the process for becoming a citizen if you weren't born here.
Right.
What are some of the key insights there?
Well, it's interesting looking at the requirements, Commitment to the Constitution.
Knowledge of U.S. history and government.
Residency. It's a formal process, clearly designed to ensure some level of integration. But the source highlights it can be a really arduous and complex process for a lot of people.
Right.
And that raises these fundamental questions about when someone is truly considered American.
Especially if there are big hurdles or people are stuck in alternative legal statuses for ages.
Exactly. It brings up this sort of tension, doesn't it, between inherent belonging, just being born here.
Versus this kind of earned belonging through naturalization.
Something like that, yeah. And then the source touches on how federal and state laws interact.
Ah, okay. How does that play into belonging?
Well, think about it. Federal law sets the main framework for citizenship, right? But when you look at things like voting rights, access to state services, even how federal immigration laws are enforced locally,
State policies make a difference.
a really significant difference to the lived experience of belonging within that state.
So your sense of belonging could actually feel quite different depending on where you live.
It absolutely could.
That's a really important nuance. It shows there isn't just one single monolithic American belonging experience.
Not at all.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about culture.
Mm-hmm. A huge factor.
The source really emphasizes the incredible diversity of cultural threads. Race, ethnicity, religion, regional differences.
Yeah.
It's a vast landscape.
It really is.
Where do we even start unpacking that in terms of belonging?
Well, the source rightly points to race and ethnicity as being maybe particularly significant threads.
Okay.
These aren't just abstract labels, they deeply influence individual experiences.
And how society includes or excludes people.
Exactly. Your cultural heritage, traditions, language, these are so fundamental to your sense of self.
And your connection to community. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And religion, too, plays such a powerful role for so many.
Oh, definitely. The U.S. has this incredible tapestry of faiths.
Each with its own values, customs, ways of interacting.
Right, which creates this really rich but also sometimes complex cultural landscape.
Where maybe not everyone feels equally seen or understood sometimes.
That's a fair point. And let's not forget those regional differences either.
Right. Someone from the Northeast versus the West Coast or the South.
Very different ways of life, different social norms sometimes. The source gives that example.
The Midwest communal values versus California individualism.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Stereotypes, maybe, but they point to real differences.
And the source makes the point that these regional distinctions can actually impact how belonging is perceived.
Yeah, both by people inside the region and those outside looking in.
Huh. Interesting. So what's the kind of overarching takeaway when we think about culture and belonging?
I think the key takeaway is that the American experience isn't, a single story. It's this constantly evolving dialogue shaped by all these incredibly diverse cultural influences.
Being continually redefined.
Exactly. And hopefully that redefinition is moving towards a more inclusive, expansive understanding of what belonging means.
Okay. Now let's consider a factor that, well, sometimes gets overlooked, maybe, but is so crucial. Socioeconomic status.
Ah, yes. Money, education, occupation.
The source material basically argues these things really shape whether you feel like you're truly part of the American fabric.
It raises really important questions about the practicalities of belonging.
How so?
Well, if you're constantly struggling to meet basic needs, education, healthcare, housing,
Yeah.
it becomes incredibly difficult to feel like a fully valued, included member of society. These aren't just individual problems, they create real barriers.
Barriers to that sense of belonging. It fosters alienation, doesn't it?
It really can.
If you're worried about rent or food,
Hmm?
participating in community events, or feeling like your voice matters, probably isn't top of mind.
Exactly. Financial constraints can seriously limit your ability to engage.
Which widens the gap between different socioeconomic groups.
It does. And as the source points out, this lack of representation in decision-making processes,
Yeah.
that can really undermine someone's sense of belonging. If you don't feel heard, how can you feel like you truly belong?
Good point. And it's not just individual circumstances, right?
Yeah.
The source also mentions communities themselves.
Right. Communities with more economic resources tend to have better infrastructure, better social services.
Which can further isolate people in less well-resourced areas.
It can become a kind of self-perpetuating cycle, yeah. Lack of resources leads to more feelings of exclusion.
If your community has inadequate support systems,
You're statistically more likely to feel isolated, excluded from the broader society.
So addressing these socioeconomic disparities.
It isn't just about economic justice. It's fundamentally about fostering a greater, more equitable sense of belonging for everyone.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's turn to the often contentious world of politics.
Always a fun topic.
Yeah. The source outlines how different political ideologies, specifically nationalism, progressivism, libertarianism, offer distinct views on who belongs.
And what belonging even means.
Let's start with the nationalist perspective.
Yeah.
What are the core ideas there regarding belonging?
Well, from a nationalist view, belonging is often tied very closely to this idea of a shared national identity.
Okay.
An identity rooted in, say, common culture, shared language, a collective history.
Right.
And the source notes this viewpoint can sometimes lead to more, well, exclusionary definitions of who's truly American.
Favoring certain groups. Supporting tougher immigration policies.
Sometimes, yeah. Prioritizing certain populations over others can be part of that perspective.
So it's a more narrowly defined circle, maybe emphasizing sameness and tradition.
Often, yes.
Now, how does that contrast with the progressive viewpoint?
The progressive take, as the source describes it, really emphasizes a much broader, more inclusive understanding.
Okay.
Strong emphasis on equality, social justice, valuing diverse backgrounds.
So belonging goes beyond just legal status.
Way beyond. It means actively working to dismantle systemic inequalities, ensuring genuine inclusion for marginalized groups. Emphasizing instead things like voluntary associations and individuals' contributions to society.
So much more fluid, less prescriptive than the other two.
Pretty much, yeah.
So we have these three quite distinct ideologies, each with its own vision. It's no wonder there are often such passionate debates on this.
Absolutely. And the constant interplay, the tension between these ideologies, it's continuously shaping our public conversations about belonging.
Influencing policy, social interactions, everything.
Right down to our daily lives and our communities.
Now, one of the most, I thought, impactful parts of the source material is where it really highlights the lived experiences of marginalized communities.
Those personal stories are powerful.
They really illuminate the complexities in ways abstract definitions just can't.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the experience shared by a first-generation immigrant. What stood out there?
What really struck me was that feeling of being constantly caught between two worlds.
Yeah.
The pressure to assimilate, often suppressing their native language, maybe.
Out of fear of ridicule or exclusion.
Yeah, but then simultaneously feeling disconnected from their own roots because of it.
That sounds incredibly difficult, navigating identity when you're straddling cultures.
It really underscores how emotionally taxing that can be.
It sounds like a constant negotiation, yeah. The source also shares the story of an LGBTQ plus individual.
Wow.
What insights does that bring?
The phrase double-edged sword for coming out really resonated.
How so?
The immense courage it takes to be your true self,
Uh-huh.
but then facing the very real possibility of rejection, discrimination, even from loved ones or society.
Right.
The specific example of the transgender man in the source, it just highlights how societal resistance to nonconformity
Especially around gender or sexuality.
can create these profound feelings of not belonging, even within your own family or community.
It's a stark reminder that belonging isn't just national or legal. It's deeply personal. Acceptance, affirmation.
Exactly, on a very human level.
And then there was the incredibly poignant experience from an individual with disabilities that, quote, seen but not truly recognized.
Oof, yeah, that one hits hard.
It really does.
It just encapsulates that frustrating, isolating feeling, doesn't it?
Being physically present, but having your contributions, your worth, your needs just overlooked.
Or dismissed. It's a different kind of marginalization, but equally significant.
Where differences lead to this pervasive sense of not fully belonging.
Of not being seen as a complete contributing member of society.
Yeah. These voices, as the source emphasizes, really highlight the adversity, but also the incredible resilience and determination of these communities.
Absolutely, and striving to claim their rightful place.
It adds so much crucial depth to understanding belonging beyond just simple definitions.
It really does. By truly listening to these experiences, we get a richer, more complex, and ultimately more accurate picture.
Of the barriers and the ongoing struggle for a more equitable society.
Where everyone can genuinely feel they belong.
Okay, finally, let's turn to the really significant role that education plays.
Ah, yes. Schools and universities.
The source makes a compelling case that the educational system has a profound impact on whether young people grow up feeling like they belong.
A huge impact.
So how can schools actively foster this sense of belonging?
Well, the source strongly emphasizes inclusive curricula as being absolutely essential.
Meaning?
When students see their own diverse histories, cultures, experiences reflected authentically in what they're learning.
It validates their identity, makes them
Good.
feel seen, valued.
Exactly, part of the larger narrative. Multicultural education actively counters stereotypes.
Creates a more welcoming environment for everyone.
Right, and the source also points to the importance of effective inclusion policies within schools.
What kind of specific programs are we talking about?
Things like targeted scholarships, mentorship programs for students from marginalized backgrounds, student-led alliance clubs celebrating diversity, that kind of thing.
And these initiatives help with social integration.
They can really enhance it, yeah. Help students connect based on shared values, mutual respect.
Fostering a stronger sense of community.
Definitely.
And it's not just the formal policies or the curriculum, is it? The educators themselves.
Oh, absolutely critical. Their approach matters immensely.
How so?
Teachers who use inclusive methods encourage participation from everyone, value diverse opinions,
They create an environment where students feel empowered.
empowered to contribute their unique voice. That active engagement, feeling valued, that's key to belonging in school.
So it sounds like the education system really is this foundational structure that can either actively build a sense of belonging or, unfortunately.
Or inadvertently perpetuate feelings of exclusion and marginalization.
Wow.
Education really has this incredible power to shape how young people see themselves and their place in the world.
Well, this deep dive into the material,
Yeah.
it's really shown just how complex American belonging is, hasn't it?
Incredibly multifaceted, yeah.
We've touched on history, law, culture, socioeconomic factors, political ideologies, all intersecting.
All playing a role in defining who belongs, and maybe more importantly, who gets to decide.
And it seems so clear that those traditional, often just legally based definitions of citizenship,
They just don't capture the full picture.
not the full, diverse spectrum of lived experiences that make up American identity.
Not at all. And the ongoing struggles of marginalized communities for recognition, for validation.
For that genuine sense of belonging.
It really underscores that inadequacy, doesn't it?
It really does. It underscores the need for all of us, maybe, to broaden our perspectives.
To move beyond those narrow legal definitions.
Yeah, and to truly embrace and value the diverse narratives that enrich American society.
Absolutely. So maybe here's a final thought for people to chew on.
Okay.
In light of everything we've talked about, how might you, in your own life, your own community, actively contribute to fostering a more inclusive, a more expansive understanding of belonging?
Thinking beyond just the legal definition of American.
Exactly. Actively seeking out and embracing the diverse stories and perspectives around you.
What small shifts
Oh,
in perspective or maybe in actions?
yeah. What small changes could potentially make a really significant positive difference in someone else's deeply felt sense of belonging?